All right, we're live. Welcome back, spiritual practitioners. This season, we are centering learning.
That's right. We're your host, Biani and Sequoia, and we're here to delve into the heart of our conversations, focusing on the lack of culturally rooted resources to support QT BIPOC folks navigating religious and spiritual trauma.
In our previous seasons, we emphasized the importance of unlearning, decolonizing, and divesting from oppressive teachings and institutions. If you're new here, welcome, and make sure to check out our previous episodes on our channel. Now, we're dedicated to deepening our knowledge and understanding so that we can better support ourselves and our clients.
As we navigate this season of learning, we aim to provide you with the tools, tips, and insights to help you on your path of reclaiming to soul work.
Whether you're well versed in spiritual practices or just beginning your journey, join us as we explore the intersectional impact of religious and spiritual trauma on mental health.
So sit back, relax, and get ready to elevate your understanding of mental health and spiritual well-being as we embark on this season of learning. Let's get started. All right, y'all. Today we are going to continue the conversation about religious trauma and ATRs. We are so happy to have Iya Onyi back for a part two because, to be honest with y'all, there was so many gems that she dropped. I
Mhm.
watched the episode so many times. I was still like, I mean, if you were watching live with us and if you haven't done so, go back to part one so you can take your notes because there was so much wisdom that was upon us. And this is why we're here to talk about ATRs and even just exploring religious trauma in general. So we're going to do a deep dive today. We're going to talk about what it means to decolonize our spiritual practices. And we're also going to focus on how spiritual therapists and practitioners can support QT BIPOC folks interested in beginning or navigating their journey to ATRs. So before we get started, I want you to do something for us. If you haven't done so already, make sure you like and subscribe to our channel. This really helps us, right? So that other people can find us and find the work that we're doing. This is the way to really best connect and support us, support the podcast, and really get these conversations out there in the world. So every subscription helps us reach more people. So make sure you do us a favor, like and subscribe to the channel right now.
Thank you so much, Biani, for just setting up what our conversation is going to be about, giving folks a little bit of our housekeeping information. I just want to welcome y'all again and remind y'all that Reclaiming Soul Work podcast is a heart centered podcast by two queer Black femme healers and spiritual social workers who explore the intersection of spirituality, mental health, and everything in between. My name is Sequoia. I use she and her pronouns. I am clearly one of the co hosts of the Reclaiming Soul Work podcast. I wear a number of different hats and just really excited to be here with you all talking about this important topic, especially in the context of religious trauma. Let's see. I am an Aquarius sun, an Aries moon, a Libra rising. So those are my big three. And then let's see, something I wanted to mix it up a little bit. Something that I've been like enjoying recently. Um, I love a good food question. So I wanted to share like something that I recently been enjoying related to food. I recently found this like peach and raspberry granola that's made like yogurt and like cereal in the morning and just other like snacks like with fruit and stuff, really good. So yeah.
That sounds really yummy. It's making me hungry.
Yes.
Um, hey, friends, thanks for joining us. My name is Biani. I use she, they pronouns. My big three: Cancer rising, Virgo sun, Aries moon. I also have like a Libra stellium, which I'm finally feeling connected to. It makes sense that I'm a Libra stellium. Um, and I think what I want to say is that I'm actually really enjoying this deck that I got called Sacred Incantations, Rituals for Trans Wisdom for every season. And I'm loving it so much, y'all. I'm using it with clients, and it's just really been helping me really connect because I have not been really into tarot for a couple weeks. I've just been really feeling disconnected to my tarot practice. And yeah, it's just a beautiful deck. And if you haven't, for season 4, Sequoia, dope, had a dope interview with the creators of this beautiful deck. So y'all need to check out that episode on our IG. Um, and yeah, that's what's going on over here.
You're so
Oh, shout
funny.
out to
I
the
love
Aries Moon sisters.
That's
Sorry.
right. That's right. That's right. I like I was saying before, I love that we are talking about religious trauma, and I actually really appreciated the comment last week from Yao and Yi about not being connected to like the word, the phrase religious trauma. And I've really been thinking about like religious trauma, church hurt, and spiritual abuse in the context of as we've been talking about like non-mainstream, non-Abrahamic, culturally rooted spiritual spaces, and what word feels, kind of rooted, grounded, connected, related to the trauma that you might experience in those spaces. So I've been sitting with that a little bit since last week. And just so many of the other kind of themes that we touched on. And I know that we are going to bring on you in here shortly, but I didn't know if you wanted to add anything else, Biani, about what you've been thinking about related to our last chat with her.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that I was sitting with around the rituals, like certain rituals in the tradition, and wondering about what it means for like Black, queer, and trans folks who enter and navigate ATRs. And of course my like spiritual therapist hat went on, like, well, what does that mean for us as spiritual practitioners? How do we support queer and trans folks who are journeying to ATRs? And so they're also thinking about like closed practices and like the sort of reverence and respect for closed practices, while also holding, you know the space of like how to best support our folks and our clients who are navigating, you know situations that might feel harmful. Even if we're kind of thinking about, I really have been sitting a lot with Iya Onyi's like invitation to be like, is it religious trauma? Like, what is, I mean, even the term, right? Like, what is it, right? And it is harm. There's definitely harm happening and hurt. But yeah, also, yeah, maybe it isn't religious trauma. I'm really open. I'm really open today and excited to kind of continue this conversation.
I, of course, and we were literally before we hit go live laughing about being elder millennials. I need to do a technology check because I think I just turned us off of live stream from Instagram. Do you still see us live on Instagram? Because I don't see us live. Thank you all for your patience. I fully accept my elder millennialness. I put my church finger up on that one.
I don't see us.
Okay, that's because I turned it off. That's why I clicked right out of it. I did
We
that.
are
Okay.
learning. Look, this is a shout out to the Aries moons and the elder millennials. Shout out to us.
I clicked right on out of it. That's what happened. Okay, just give me 1 second, you all. I am
I don't see us though.
Okay, 1 second, you all. 1 second. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Onyi, for being patient.
Go live.
Oh, we are in retrograde too. Things. Okay, see, that makes way. Thank you, sister friend. Thank you, Aries moon sister. Thank you for explaining what's been going on because I have been struggling with my technology. Like, I've just been having a hard time,
Okay.
and maybe
Think. I think we got it, friends. I think we back. I think we back on. I think elder millennials are up. I think we up.
point one, 1 point for us, zero for Meta.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you for checking in about your thoughts from the last live. I would love to bring on Yi um here on stage with us so we can chat more. Shall we do that? Do we have a little bit more we need to say?
No, we are ready. We are ready for our guest.
Hello.
Greetings, y'all. Y'all
Yay!
just caught me sipping some tea.
That's okay. That's okay. We around the kitchen table. You supposed to have your
Yeah, yeah.
tea. You supposed to
Hey,
have
that's
your
right.
tea. That's right. That's
I wonder
right.
if we're all elder millennials. Is that what's happening in the kitchen
Um,
table?
listen, I'm almost 50, so
Yes,
I
honey.
I'm almost
Yes,
50, so I'm technically an Xennial. I am
that's
that cusp
right.
between Gen X and Millennial. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
But I am for sure elder because this memory tells a whole story. And
Listen,
so does the
honey.
perimenopause. Okay. Okay.
Now that is the
Oh,
conversation.
yes. I was about to be like, we need to have a conversation about because
That
I'm
is the
there. Hmm.
conversation. Okay.
Yes.
Well,
We're
all
about to
right.
change the whole topic of the podcast.
That's right. We back. We back. We back. We back. Okay. So we loved the conversation that we had last week. There was so much information sharing and just understanding about the intersections of not only our work, but also our thoughts about religious trauma, being therapists related to those intersections and what that means. Not only as an individual experiencing these spiritual spaces, but then also being there, in a helping profession at some aspects, related to other people who are in other spaces that might be similar. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, we would love to like hop right back into the conversation. Biani,
Sure.
was there some more that you wanted to say?
No, yeah, I think there was a few. I know that you, Onya, you also want to kind of get into it as well. And no, I don't have anything to add around. Oh, did I?
No, I'm right here.
Oh, okay. Listen, things are just. Yeah, I don't think
Listen,
I have
like it
anything
is
else
what
to
it
add.
is. We're gonna move forward. We're gonna
I
move
know. I'm like,
forward.
it is. We here. We here. I don't have anything else to add. Yes, I'm ready. We're ready.
I had a really good time last time we spoke. For those of you who may not have seen that last episode yet, my name is Ia Onyi Soyi. I'm a priest of Oshun as well as a licensed clinical social worker. I'm an initiated priest in the Lukumi Santeria tradition, which is a diasporic tradition rooted in Ifa, which is an West African spiritual system. Oh, I am a Pisces sun, a Pisces moon. I am an Aries rising. I also have a Pisces stellium. My Pisces is in Venus. And so, yeah, that's just a little bit of, how I come with it. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us and reintroducing, reorienting everyone. Yeah, to not only this space, but also you and your work and what you bring to this conversation. And I mean, let's just jump right into it. I On my end, it looks like the first question is, why is it important for therapists or practitioners outside of the spiritual therapist community to have conversations about religious trauma in African traditional religion? And just wondering, what y'all think about that question. And please, folks in the comments, comment, send some questions to us too.
Oh yeah, I would absolutely love that as well. So for me, I think it's really important that as clinicians, like we said in the last session, that it's important for us to understand who we are talking to, and so it's important for us to understand the breadth and the depth of the experiences that the individuals in front of us may have gone through and or may be going through currently. So when we talk about closed practices, such as those within the ATRs systems, right? We're talking about um, practices that are built on relationship, right? That are built on relationship. So you have someone who, whether they were raised in the tradition or not, or whether they sought out someone to be their teacher, the only way that you can be engaged as a practitioner in any of these traditions is to have a teacher who you have chosen to work with, right? Or, one that was passed down through your lineage. And the breaches that, can occur when there is abuse within that spiritual context is a little bit different than when we have some Abrahamic traditions, right? So, for instance, as someone who was raised in the church, you may go to church and you may decide, I don't like this church, so I'm going to chuck up my deuces. I'm going to go next door and find me another church. Or my friend goes to a church, so I'm going to go to church with them. However, in closed systems, one, we still have a lot of people who, don't talk about the practices that they engage in, even with their closest friends. Or you may have someone who you don't necessarily have access to as many teachers or to know where the spiritual homes are in your community or outside of your community. And so getting to know a new teacher, right? Getting to know someone new, getting introduced to and engaged with a new spiritual family is something that is very, very important. The work that we do as practitioners, whether you are someone who is going through the rites of initiation, or you're just wanting to learn, or you had actually gone through the process of being a practitioner, right? Somebody who has actually had services and ceremony to be a practitioner. We don't do any of that work alone. We don't do any of that work alone. And because the work that we do comes with prescriptions for our life, any future work that we need to do also has to be done in community, right? And so if you do not have access to a spiritual community, if there's been a breach between you and your spiritual teacher, or other people within that community, and you don't have anyone to discuss it with, it can feel incredibly lonely. You can also begin to feel as though there is something wrong with you, right? You made a mistake, you've doomed your life. Many of us who have chosen to be practitioners, we have an understanding and a belief that, this tradition has saved our lives. And so when you decide to disconnect from your spiritual home, or if you're going through that process where you're feeling hurt or harmed by, that environment, you may actually be thinking that you're putting your life at risk, because these are the people who are helping you to engage in ceremony, who are teaching you how to live your life every day in a way that keeps you aligned and healthy and full. And as someone who came into this tradition, and who the fullness of my life was found with within this tradition, having had the experience of feeling hurt within my spiritual community, if it wasn't for my therapist, who happens to identify as being as Christian, being open to having conversations with me about that hurt, right? What was already within me that, made what I was experiencing feel deeper, and supporting me in, drawing those threads. I don't think that I would have been able to look at myself to understand the areas where, I needed to grow when it was time for me to continue to be in that community, and also look at myself when it was the time for me to decide to leave that community. So we have to understand that we're dealing with the fullness of people, right? And we cannot, servicing Black and brown people, we cannot be in a space where we're only looking at symptom amelioration, because we are limiting the work and the support that we do with the individuals that we service. And so if we're looking at the whole person, then we have to be prepared to have honest conversations about the fullness of who they are.
Okay. I, I'm really sitting. I appreciate you sharing like your personal experience too. And I want to go back a little bit to the closed practice. Something you said about closed practices had me thinking that it feels like there's an upside to closed practices and also like the downside to it,
Oh,
in the sense that
absolutely.
you might lose your community, right? And so I'm thinking about Black, queer, and trans folks who might leave their family of origins, you know, maybe a Christian tradition, and they decide to, go to something that's more culturally rooted, connected to ancestors, right? Like an African spirituality, enter a closed practice. Like you said, there's relational stuff, work that's at the core of spiritual work. And a rupture happens, right? Some
Mhm,
type of rupture, whether it's harm, hurt, right? Like, and
mhm,
the risk could be like losing your community again. And that's
mhm,
what resonated for me. I really appreciate what you're saying. And I guess I'm wondering how like a spiritual therapist or a practitioner, like, working with Black, queer, and trans folks who might experience something like you, where might have been a rupture in their spiritual
mhm,
home and there's a breach, like you said. Like, how would they
mhm.
navigate that? What are some things you could,
Yeah. So,
advise
so
or
I
offer?
think, yeah, so I think that the first thing is to, it's easy to have a lot of judgment, right, when it comes to a closed practice, because if you're not someone who's engaged with it, then you can feel like the way that it functions isn't the way that it's supposed to function, right? So first, giving honor and, making room for the complexity of the challenge for the person that you're working with. Because it may seem real seamless, like, why do you have so much reverence for this person? You know what I mean? You've already been through hurt and trauma. You've already worked through these things. You chose to leave those environments. Why do you want to stay here? What is happening? And so one, being open to having conversations around what the situation means for the individual that you're working with, right? All levels of it, right? So what's happening now? What does it feel like now? Is it tied to anything that happened before? What are some of the stories that you're, telling yourself? Like what is that rooted in, right? And also it gets really difficult because make room for the fact that a lot of a lot of what the individual would be going through or experiencing, they may not be able to explain to you the nuance of it because they may not know, and they also may not be able to explain to you the nuance of it because this is a closed practice, right? So they can't discuss, oh well, this and this and this and this and that's the right, because like we just don't, we're not able to do that for many different reasons. So understanding the connections that you can support them in drawing, being open to them having the conversations with you, actively listening. And while there's some education that they may feel comfortable providing to you, I've come across quite a few practitioners who don't want to spend their whole session educating you on their religion, right? Like there are nuances that, may be important, but there, may be some nuances that are not important, right? And so, really following the individual's lead in the conversation, even if you don't understand, because ultimately it's still their decision about what they want to do, how they want to do it. And, unconditional regard is is a foundational tenet in the work that we do. And so we need to make sure that we're showing up with that unconditional regard, and we're giving the individual the right to, self-determination in the process, no matter how we view it, right? There's a certain amount of reverence and deference that we give in this tradition to our elders that is necessary for the work that we have to do, and it's necessary, and it's required for the lives that we live, right? Um, and it doesn't function the same way other traditions or religious experiences function. So you really have to go with a heavily client-centered approach when you're having these types of conversations.
Yeah, I appreciate you reminding us too that we have to hold the fullness of this because it is important. Um, and why we have there's a need for closed practices. Like it's important out of reverence. Like I totally yeah, it's a really good point. So do you have any questions, Sequoia? Did I cut were you gonna say okay. Um did you have anything you wanted to share Onyi about last week? Like any kind of things you wanted to like come back to?
I
I had a
did.
question too. I had a question too.
You go with your question first,
Okay.
and then we'll see if we can loop it in all together.
Yeah, let's try. Let's try. So I'm thinking a lot
Double
about
Dutch.
oh my gosh. I one of my bucket lists is to learn how to double dutch and not double like I okay, sidebar. But I really want to learn how to not mess up the anyway. Okay. Okay, let me get back to so I was thinking about what you said last week about the rituals. Oh,
Hmm.
actually the piece around not knowing in the moment what you might get into.
Hmm.
I'm proud of and it had me thinking a lot about how there's a necessity for that. Like I'm holding the nuance here, but I'm wondering how that could be maybe like activating for survivors or folks who, and how do you imagine somebody like what would be the best way for them to navigate that, right? Because if like part of the work is to also like surrender to the experience, but you could enter into things that could be risky for your safety or like, something could happen. And yeah, I'm curious about what you would say to like a practitioner or like
Hmm.
some like yeah, a practitioner around how they can prepare for something like that. And I'm
Hmm.
thinking too around like black and queer trans folks who
Hmm.
might be exposed to more harm if they're not privy
Hmm.
to. We just don't know, right? Like I'm not gonna sit here and
Hmm.
say, but like I'm curious about how you kind of would.
Yeah, 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 for sure. I'm going to tackle this in two ways. One for the individual that may be going into ceremony, and then, two for a therapist that may be working with someone who is open about the fact that they may be going into ceremony, right? So I think that for the individual that may be going into ceremony, remember there's a huge rush that we have socially that I've noticed in the past few years to jump into spiritual relationship, right? So I've been wanting to learn, I've been wanting to get into this thing. I met this person on the internet, some Babalao hit me in my DMs and said, "Oh, you can fly to Nigeria, you can have the ceremony, you will be good for the rest of your life." And uh, so the first thing that I would advise is you should not be doing ceremony with anyone who you have not developed a relationship with. And that relationship needs to extend beyond finances, right? So the relationship is not simply I've paid you for something, now you talk to me, blah, blah, blah. Like there has to be exchange, there has to be balance, right? That's a part of an energetic piece. However, if you do not feel like you can have open and honest conversations with the person who is providing you with the service or coordinating your service, that's a huge red flag, right? Especially if you have a history of trauma. If you don't feel like you can disclose your trauma to the individual who is coordinating or providing your service, that's a huge red flag. And the huge red flags may be with the individual, or the huge red flag may be within you. Sometimes we have not worked through what our triggers are. We have not worked through how we cope or deal with things. We don't know what our trauma reactions are, right? Because if you're someone who engages in the fawn trauma reaction, right? Meaning that, when you're triggered, all you want to do is please, 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 that really puts you in a dangerous position to consistently be triggered because you don't feel safe enough within yourself to have honest conversations around what you need and to say no to people, right? Or to ask questions as much as you can. So those of us who have extensive trauma need to be doing our own trauma work. While I'm very transparent in saying I give honor to the spiritual spaces that I've been in, even if I'm no longer in them, because that was the beginning of my healing from my trauma, not therapy, right? And that was done through the relationships that I built, which then led to ceremony. So if you're jumping into ceremony first and you don't have full safety within yourself and you're wanting to extend that to another individual, then you're putting the cart before the horse because it's the relationship with the person that is coordinating the service where the safety comes in addition to how you are feeling within your body. Does that make sense to you what I'm saying? Right? Because we cannot, right? So like even, I have longstanding clients who, may contract me to do some spiritual work with them. Sometimes I don't know what we're going to do because I don't know what they're going to do, right? It may be something that I have not done. And also sometimes work is spirit led. And so, what does that mean when it's spirit led? That means that I could think that we have step A, step B, step C, step D planned out. And then we get in the middle and something needs to change, right? Now, I'm trauma informed. So I know how to say, okay, you may feel something cold against your skin, and it's not anything to hurt you. If you need something, raise your hand and say it to me, right? I know how to do that. But if someone else is working with you and they don't know how to do that, and you don't trust the person that you're with, you haven't told the person that is coordinating for you your needs and the support that you might need, then you have left yourself feeling stuck, right? So we have to be very clear about who we are and what we need before we enter into any relationship, including a spiritual one. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Right?
Yeah, I'm kind of hearing the relational component is really important. That is not
Yes.
about an extractive. And but it's also interesting too to hold that you have these skills too as a as a licensed clinical social worker
Mhm.
that maybe other spiritual practitioners don't have. And I'm just sitting with that because something about that still feels like ooh, like
It's very ooh, right? I mean, if you're speaking to someone when we go for services, right? Sometimes you're not even communicating with someone who speaks English fluently, right? Sometimes there's a translator, sometimes there's not a translator. Sometimes you can walk into a situation and they're telling you do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. In the moment, you have no idea what that means. And if they don't speak English, then there could be something lost in translation. If they touch you to tell you to do something, right? Let's say they say, put your hands here, right? If you have trauma with someone physically trying to touch you, a certain way, then you might jump and be afraid of that. They're not trying to harm you, but it's about the reactions within us. I just want to remind people trauma is as much about how we react to things, right? Based on the experiences that we've had or the perceptions of the experiences that we're having as much as what somebody else is doing. So we have to be aware that it is relational in terms of relationship, but it's a dynamic between what's being done and the perception. Same thing with the dead names thing. Let me just double back to this as an example, because last session we were talking about trans individuals who are going for services, right? And they may be asked for their birth name and how that can be very jarring to the spirit because it's like, hold up, I was never that person, right? Somebody else gave me that name, and now you want to use it to tell me about who I am and what I need. That doesn't make any sense to me, right? And so I want to give honor to the question, to the awareness that may feel traumatic and disconnecting for a person. And I want to say, in our tradition, we believe that every single thing is an energetic exchange, right? Every single thing comes from spirit, and has its own spirit embedded in it, right? What do I mean by that? In in most African cultures, I believe all, but I don't know of all, right? But in all cultures that I'm aware of, there is a ceremony that is done for naming, right? And so that naming piece is a communication between spirit, right? And the individuals that are a part of naming you. Now, while in Western culture, we still don't do that. Like we may not follow that trajectory. What we believe is that the ashe that comes from that name being spoken over you your whole life has its own energy and its own level of communication between your spirit and the spirit realm, right? And no matter who meant that for you when they gave it to you, it being embedded in your spirit, your ori, right, which is connected to spirit throughout the whole of your lived experience, provides a connection. And so when divination is done, there is that connection that is being sought. It is not to harm you. It's simply to say, this is the person whose spirit has known all these years as this. And so we come to ask about this individual simply for clarity. Now, if nobody explains that to you because you have a physical reaction to the name, and there's nothing wrong with you having a physical reaction, but because you have a physical reaction to that name and then what that has meant for you and to you, you will automatically assume that this person does not accept you, especially if you have a history of not being accepted, and especially if you don't give yourself permission to have that conversation with the person who is coordinating for you, right? And so that's what I mean about the process. That's what I mean about the dynamic. Everything has its own energy. Everything is relational. And we have to honor the energy around the experiences that still live in us, to acknowledge that some of what's happening has nothing to do with the other person, right? It has to do with what's in us that we have yet to work through, come to terms with, or at least feel safe enough to have an open conversation about. Does that make sense what I'm saying? I'm gonna keep asking that because I see the look on your face. I see it.
Well, part of
It-
it is
it's
because I'm like, I have to watch it again. I'm hearing that the actual practice of dead naming is about connecting to ancestors and connecting to the folks who gave you that name, like the energy of that name. I guess I want to
Mhm,
understand. Is that what you mean?
mhm. Yes, yes. So it's about connecting to spirit, right? So the spirit realm. So it's ancestors, God, deities, right? Ifa, which is a prophet in our tradition, to simplify it. Um, but also the energy of that name that has been with you, that name has been with you, right? That name has been with you. Even as a priest, we don't just choose our names. There is divination done to decide what is the best name for you. And so that's a connection between the diviner, you, and spirit at the time of your ceremonies to determine, is this name the name that should be with you because of who you are and how you show up in the world, right? Somebody else might think that my name means means sweet honey because of how it looks, and it does, right, to a certain extent. But it has another meaning in the spirit realm based on who I am, based on my life path, based on my ita. And so, one of the things I would recommend, and once again, this is a relational piece. If you're someone who has a birth name that you no longer connect to, and you have a relationship with the person who you're receiving services from, have a conversation with them around changing that relationship, like, is there a way, right, to have a conversation with spirit around that name not being said during divination, right? Is there a way that we can use my current name? Is there another name that we can be using? And there may be a path to that, but that's why I'm so heavy on what is the relationship that you have. This is not this. You can contract somebody for work, sure, all day, all day, all day, but are you really going to get what you need from that person when you have a history of trauma? And I do not recommend it. I do not recommend simply contracting for services if you are, QT BIPOC folk. I just don't think that that works. We have to be in relationship. We have to be in sacred, safe relationship. Let me say that, in sacred, safe relationship.
Mm. I appreciate you for bringing it back to that, because, and that meaning having sacred, safe relationships, because I think I'm still sitting with the understanding of how folks may come to um, certain aspects of ATRs, and having this understanding about it being so heavily relational based, and not either not understanding that, not being prepared for that, not having done any work,
Hmm.
prior to coming into those spaces, and like, what does that mean?
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, many people choose ATRs thinking that it's, because it's African centered, it's the opposite of Christianity. So I find Christianity to be very rule based and structured and dogmatic and oppressive, that I'm automatically going to choose the opposite thing. This is Black, so it must be freedom. I must be able to do whatever I want. I must be right? This tradition requires a lot of discipline. This tradition requires a love for it, right? It requires a love for the Orisha, a desire to grow. This tradition really is about you being so committed to being in alignment with your spiritual self, right? So in so much alignment with your spiritual self that you are willing to engage with what the remedies provided to you through the tradition, right? Willing to engage with your ancestors. Everything is about relationship. Yes, we have ritual, yes, we have things to do, but it's about relationship, right? Relationship with your ancestors, relationship with the Orisha. When we go through ceremony and we bring the Orisha in our home, when we wear our ileke, yes, they're beautiful. I have a beautiful shrine, right? I have a beautiful ancestor altar, but I'm smiling because I'm still working on my discipline, right? So I'm smiling, but I have a beautiful ancestor altar, a beautiful shrine, but it means nothing. It means nothing if I don't spend time with my Ori, right? My Orisha mean nothing if I don't spend time with my ancestors, right? Like my Orisha mean nothing if I don't spend time with them and learn how to take care of them, right? I mean nothing if I don't give honor to all the places and spaces I've been to be able to get here. Everything is about relationship. And I just want to kind of double back and just make myself clear, because I know I spoke about leaving my spiritual home, but I always want to make this clear, because I see people talk about leaving their spiritual home and they speak with such disrespect. And while I know that there may be hurt and harm, while I know that you may have gone through a lot of things, but most of the time, why people choose to leave isn't about such great harm that they need to be disrespectful. It's about um, other things that have occurred, right? And so I want to just make myself clear, because this is important to me to say. I give honor to my former godmother for caring for me, because it's the relationship that we had that made room for me to have my crown, right? And so what we tend to do from a Western perspective is walk around and take and hold and say that I have these Orisha, I have these like they're mine, they're pretty, I'm a priest, call me. No, 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 no. We are called to be humble. We are called to be honorable. We are called to be whole. We are called to be loving. We are called to know ourselves first and foremost. And so long tirade over. That's my TED talk. But we have to be in a space where we know ourselves, right? Because otherwise, all we're doing is running from one thing to the next. And you can't run from yourself and the pain that you've gone through, no matter where you are. It's going to show up again because you
Mhm.
have to face it to heal from it. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Mm. Thank you so much for sharing the perspective, bringing this conversation back into uh, this place. I feel like to talk about um, like what is it? What do we kind of do with this, right? Like what are some of the kind of other questions that you've received from other therapists even about integration of ATRs?
Yeah. Oof. There's a lot of fear, like I talked about last time. I find that Black and brown therapists, Black therapists in particular want to hold to the strictest, letter of the law. Many of us who are practitioners feel like we can't have conversations with our clients about who we are. We hide it. When I was looking for a therapist for myself, I really wanted somebody who was a priest. And I was referred to several people, but they didn't mention being a priest at all in their bios, or being practitioners, or being spiritual in nature. And that was a complete turn off for me, because I know, who I'm called to work with. And so the first thing I want to say is, if you are a spiritual therapist, if you are a practitioner in a practitioner in an ATR, I search within yourself, because we have to do what is best for us. But if that shows up in your work, give yourself permission to name it, right? To name it, so that people who are looking for you can find you, right? Can find you. I also think that if your intuitive gifts show up in your work, then you have to give yourself permission to name it for the individuals you're working with, because as I tell people, I can't divorce myself from myself. So a part of informed consent in the work that I do is, I am spiritual. This is my religious tradition. I do not want to impart it on you. However, it's important for me to share, because that's a huge part of my worldview. I do integrate it into my work, including my intuitive gifts that show up, right? So it orients people to who I am. Um, Naturally, right? I also want to say that if you're someone who is doing maybe a case consultation to see if someone's a good fit for you, or you taking on a new client, or if you have clients and you don't know what their worldview is with regards to spirituality, ask. you know what's your worldview? Do you have a spiritual practice? A lot of times people ask, do you have a religion? Or they might say, are you Christian, Muslim, Jewish? Right? But what is your view on spirituality? Right? Do you have a spiritual practice? Are you a part of a spiritual tradition? What does that look like to you? Because that will also tell you. Some people are raised in spiritual traditions and currently don't practice, or they practice but they don't have a spiritual home. So they may tell you that. Do you have a spiritual community? Right? So we want to be able to use language that's welcoming, that's open, that's descriptive, and it gives the individual the opportunity to describe to us the experiences that they're having. If you're a spiritual practitioner and you're going for therapy, I encourage you to be open during the consultation, or that first session. It's a part of you, right? Those of us who are spiritual practitioners, our Life is geared and directed by the work that we do. It really is. We're given prescriptions for our life. And so it's important that we give ourselves the honor of describing that to people who we're working with in the best that we can. And I see somebody, making comments in the chat, right? And so, what I want to encourage people to do is, if you don't believe in religion, that's fine too. If you are a therapist, if you are a counselor, if you are somebody who is, giving support to people, you don't have to believe in anything. But if you're giving honor to the person who is in front of you, that it's important for you to give honor to who they are and to not who you want them to be, or giving honor to who you are as you're servicing or you're working with or you're speaking with other people. And so we want to make ourselves available to support the people who we're working with. And we can't do that being closed. We, can't do that being separate from them. We can't do that decentering them and centering ourselves. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for not only this response, but also calling in, you know, some of the comments. I think it's spot on because these comments are pretty I would say people this is how folks think, this I understand what this person is saying. And if we like bring this in bring us into a therapeutic conversation, I feel like, and I'm going to put up on the screen for folks that are watching this shortly, um the comment, but it's important to talk about religion right now. It's important to talk about decolonizing religion right now, for many of again, just some of the thoughts that are being brought up here. Understanding the difference between reality and imagined facts will help you construct your belief system in the most reliable way possible. And then this other comment about religion and beliefs function as an addiction for many people. Like all addiction, it keeps its addicts from facing and feeling their own emotional and psychological problems. And as someone that is rooted in liberation psychology, I understand the historical lineage kind of context to religion, and how that is connected to a lot of folks understanding of liberation in a particular way, and that now folks are decolonizing and deconstructing from some aspects of that connection to their religion, and the experiences that they've had or the things that they've been told about religion. And so as therapists, it's important to understand not only, again, like that cultural context related to, like, let's say the Black family, for instance, or slavery, for instance, right? But there's also this piece to even like regional understandings to connections to religion, like being Southern, and right, like there's all these layers to it, right? So it's not just about people escaping in religion, right? As for me, that's how I'm understanding these comments. It's not just folks escaping from religion, wanting to hide, or some aspect, some mindset like that. It's also that religion was seen as a way to connect. It was seen as a way to get access to resources. Being in those spaces was seen.
For sure, right? And so it's the both and, right? It's the both and, because let's be clear, there is a lot of spiritual bypassing that occurs, right? I don't need to do therapy. I don't need to take medication. I don't have to go to the therapist. I pray about it, right? Or in my tradition, we have spiritual tools, right? We got Florida water, we got white baths, right? We have things that we do to like clean ourselves. We got sage, we got Palo Santo. But baby, let me tell you, even though a white bath will support you in cleaning your aura, You may go to divination, and then divination may say, go see a therapist, go get on some kind of medication because that's what you need, right? There is no amount of white bath in the world that, will support you if you need medication, if you need therapy, or if you need to be in the hospital for a period of time, right? We have to, and this is why I'm so passionate about blending both the clinical and the spiritual, because we have to bring those two worlds together for the whole person who sees themselves as spiritual. Because what we do understand is, I've been doing some research into some things about like highly sensitive people, like mirror neurons, and things related to spirituality, and how it supports those of us who have that worldview, and what happens to us when we're disconnected spiritually, right, versus when we connect spiritually. And so we have to be able to understand ourselves through the lens of who we are, because like I said, for just like for someone who there are no amount of white baths in the world that will support their emotional wellness enough if they also need therapy. For me, there was no therapist that would support my emotional wellness enough because I needed my spirituality, this spirituality, not Christianity, right? And so when we're giving honor to the person, and full transparency, because I discuss this all the time, I'm someone who has a history of suicidal ideation, right? Severe depression, right? History of trauma, right? Self-negation. And so understanding that this all, right? Because the Bible said, all things come together for the good, right? So all of me comes together to form the person who you see, who is able to be a whole person today, right? Through this lens, not any other. And both of those things have to work together. Both of those things have to work together.
Oh, there's so much, like, I just want to keep talking to y'all, like listening. Um, I mean, there's ways that I really appreciate the invitation that you have, and I know that we're closing up now, but like the invitation you're offering therapists to truly be culturally like competent and like really trauma informed and holding the nuance and the complexity and the both, and because our profession has trained us in a particular way to act like spirituality isn't a part of our healing as therapists. Like
Mhm,
we act like it's
mhm,
not there, and
mhm.
psychotherapy is spiritual work. And so I appreciate
It's
this
soul
invitation
work. We're
because,
claiming soul
right,
work. Hello, hello.
right,
Yes.
exactly. That's what we've been doing this. Like, and so it's nice
Mhm,
to hear and be reminded of that. I also want to hold too relational work, seeing hearing you talk about ATRs as a deeply relational spiritual practice really is true for therapy. Like it's
Have-
true for so many, right? And so it's
mhm,
interesting, like I don't know, just I really appreciate the way that you really invited us to imagine that because I it's true. I have experience as a therapist serving Black QT folks where some of my clients are like getting a reading, they're paying for the service, and then I don't hear more about the relationship. Like there's ways that I've seen that in my work. And so I
mhm.
appreciate me, like I feel like you've given me tools to like deepen my spiritual assessment. And it's something that we've been working on. Sequoia and I came up with this spiritual assessment tool that we haven't really like put out there yet. We haven't launched it. We shared it with a few people. And one of our biggest questions is around what are your spiritual practices? Who's your spiritual community? I think we need more therapists asking those questions that you invited us to like consider, Onyi, because our profession is not doing that. We're not being trained in the way that really reclaims the soul. And so, yeah, thank
Yeah.
you for that. I mean, again, there's so many
I
gems.
I
Yeah,
love the spiritual assessment. If I may be somebody who tests it out and uses it, please,
yes.
please feel free to send it my way. One question,
I'm
if
gonna
you
send it
don't
to
have
you.
it on there yet, one question that I really want to encourage you to, people to ask and for you to add is, how do you feel in your spiritual community if you have one? How do you feel in your spiritual community if you have one? So yeah, but yeah, I would love to use that. That's
That's a
excellent.
beautiful question, and I love that because we're coming back to the relational. I love that. Oh
Hmm.
my gosh! So yeah, we're definitely gonna send it to you. All
Mhm.
right, y'all. This is the saddest part because this is where we have to say goodbye. But we would love to have you come back, Iya Onyi, when you can, sis. Like we would love to have you come back when
Anytime.
you can. Yeah. And so, are there any upcoming offerings that folks who are tuning in should know about? Anything that they should know about
Yes.
you, where to find you, and
Yes,
stay
absolutely.
connected?
So the main offering that I'm actually, having right now is in August. I have a retreat to, Costa Rica for therapists who are spiritual in nature, any spirituality, to really talk about how you show up in your business, how you develop your business, how you grow your business, how you feel whole within your business. And so we will be in Costa Rica from August 11th to the 16th. And so please touch base with me if you have any questions about that. The retreat website is sanctuarytheretreat.com. You can also find me on Instagram at Melissa Eifel, Melissa F is in Frank, ILLCSW. And your Instagram tends to be my main format. Melissa Eiffel is my birth name. That's my given name, and that's the name that I go by professionally.
Thank you so much. So yeah, for those who are tuning in, what are your takeaways from today's episode? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. You heard mine. I'm curious, Sequoia, if you have any takeaways from today's episode. And also for you too, Onyi, if you want to share something really quickly about a takeaway, we'd love to hear it.
Hmm. You know what, my takeaway from today's episode is that it is so important for us all to understand what we're welcoming in and how we're welcoming people to be in conversation and relationship with us. And that starts with us. I said some things today I did not think that I was going to say. And so thank you guys for welcoming me in and for supporting me and being comfortable in sharing the fullness of who I am. So thank you. Thank you.
Oh, it's our pleasure. We're so happy to be in community with you and just grateful,
Same.
that you had, again, just the time to even come back to talk to us. Like, that was amazing. I'm like, yes, part two. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you for that. Let's see. My takeaway is I just have a deeper understanding for how important it is to not only talk about religion, spiritual practices, history, and background, but also just understanding, more about relationship and its importance in, culturally rooted spiritual spaces and what the implications are for that related
Mhm.
to specifically Black, queer, and trans folks and relational trauma.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I love that phrase, relational trauma. That's where this lands for me when we talk about spiritual abuse, when we talk about, quote unquote religious trauma.
Mm-hmm.
It's relational trauma
Mm-hmm.
within the context of, spiritual tradition. So I,
Mm-hmm.
I love that phrase. Thank you for offering that, because that's where this
Yeah,
lands for me. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's
Thank
really resonating for me too.
Yeah.
Like if we think about that, like kind of aspect of religious trauma that we're talking about relational trauma at the root of it. Absolutely. Whew. Again, listen, y'all, I imagine y'all were taking notes. And if come back to this episode, make sure you like and subscribe to our channel because if you want more of this wisdom, y'all got to come back. And if you subscribe to our channel, that means more people can find these episodes that they really desperately need. That's what I'm going to say. You need us in your life. So I want to just say thank you, thank you, thank you to our guests. And thank you for those who've been tuning in live. Thank you for those who are watching this. Please hit us up in the comments if you have questions or things you want to kind of come back to. But we really appreciate y'all being in community here with us. I'm going to like pass it over to Sequoia before I close this out. If you
I don't have anything additional outside of we have our next episode coming up in 2 weeks on Monday, 7:30 Eastern. We're circling back to our conversation, our intersectional conversation on religious trauma. We talked about a lot of good snippets in our first part for that. So definitely check that out. That is on IG, if I remember that correctly, the first part. But catch us for part two and our upcoming guests and panelists that we have to talk more about religious trauma and therapy. And yeah, send us a message, hit us up in the DMs wherever you follow us on IG, TikTok, YouTube, our newsletter.
We are everywhere, y'all. All right. Thank you so much for being in community with us and supporting a heart centered podcast by two queer Black femme healers and spiritual social workers who explore the intersection of magic, spirituality, mental health, and everything in between. If you want to stay connected, because we are building the spiritual practitioner and healing community, subscribe to our YouTube page. And once you subscribe, you'll get reminders for future episodes when those release. You also can go on our website and sign up on the landing page to be notified of new episodes. And if you can, join our, first quarter moon monthly newsletter. Again, we got some really great resources coming, and our newsletter subscribers will be the first to know. And make sure you follow us on socials. Thank you so much for being here, y'all. We'll see you the next Monday. Take care.